I've been very fortunate, blessed, lucky, whatever word you want to use, to be here still. And so why not take that opportunity and devote my time and energy to being able to make that happen?
That was a clip from my guest today. When he said he was able to make that happen, he was referring to travel, because when he made the commitment, he had just $12 in his bank account. $12! And one thing I really wanted to explore was how somebody who was never able to save up a lot of money for their entire adult life was able to turn that around and save $20,000 and later travel 16,000 miles through 34 states and 18 national parks, fulfilling his travel dreams. How does that happen? How do you change a lifetime of habits? We get into that, and he also shares very openly, which I really appreciated, his journey to recovery from addiction, because he was living in a sober house at the time when he'd made his decision to travel. So we talk about that, talk about using travel as a bridge to create connections. And Matt is an international piano entertainer, so he has some stories from the road. I was really excited just to hear what that lifestyle is like and to get to live a little bit of that vicariously through his stories. What is it like to sit there at a piano and create the vibe for a room? If you've been to a piano bar, you know what I'm talking about. Matt does that for a living. So we talk about his music, his experience touring, his time living in New York City, why travel was the thing for him that he felt he needed to help him grow as an individual, valuing minimalism over possessions, some of the benefits of that. We talk about being analytical versus being spontaneous in terms of making those spur-of-the-moment travel decisions. Sometimes you think you might want to step back and think things over. Other times, maybe you just need to go. I'll share some more thoughts about that after the interview in this show. And one of the things that Matt talks about that is a bit counterintuitive actually surprised me, because it's generally not advice I would give, but in a certain situation, I think it makes a lot of sense. In Matt's, it did, and I want to pull that out and talk about that as well after the interview and leave you with a quote, of course, and plenty more. A lot packed into this show today, and you're going to hear it right now. So buckle up, strap in. Thanks for being here, and welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
You're listening to the Zero to Travel podcast, where we explore exciting travel-based work, lifestyle, and business opportunities, helping you to achieve your wildest travel dreams. And now your host, world wanderer and travel junkie, Jason Moore.
Hey there, it's Jason with ZeroToTravel.com. Welcome to the show, my friend. Thanks for hanging out, letting me bring a little travel into your ears today. This is a show to help you travel the world on your terms, to fill your life with as much travel as you desire, no matter what your situation or experience. How are you doing, my friend? I hope this podcast finds you well. Got a wonderful guest on today's show who is from this community. I always encourage people to reach out, because this is, after all, a community-powered show. It's all about sharing. If you ever want to get in touch, by the way, drop me a line. Jason@zerototravel.com is my email. I read them all. You can also leave me a voicemail, which somebody did recently. I'll play that later in the show. And I want to say thanks to them just for checking in on me. You'll hear what that's all about later. But you can leave me a voicemail just by clicking that link. 90 seconds or less is all it takes. You don't have to sign up with an email or anything. So get in touch. This is a two-way conversation. And that's what Matt did. Matt got in touch with me, shared his story, how he went from having addiction issues and being in a sober living house with just $12 in his bank account to saving $20,000 in 7 months and taking off to follow his travel dreams. How inspiring. And not just inspiring, it's a story that's filled with a lot of lessons, a lot of takeaways from this conversation. Some practical takeaways in terms of saving and mindset around travel and things like that. And also, those perspectives that we get from other people, from listening to other people's stories. And that's what this is all about, right? Getting those new perspectives that we can't get on our own. That's what I love about interview shows, and that's what I love about having the chance to interview people interview guests, whether they're from the community or other places, and bring them on and share those conversations with you. So thanks for being a part of this. All right, now I want to slip and slide into today's interview segment. Don't forget to stick around on the back end. After the interview, I want to highlight the counterintuitive saving advice that Matt shared, plus talk a little bit about those spontaneous decisions to travel versus being more analytical and taking your time to make the decisions on those trips. Maybe it's a destination you're considering, or maybe it's just a trip as a whole. There's a little bit of a balance there, so we'll have a little commentary around that. Of course, I'll leave you with a quote. All that happening after the interview. Stick around for that. But now, please enjoy my conversation with Matt, and I will see you on the other side, my friends. Where are you?
I'm in Nashville.
Ooh.
I had never been to Nashville, well, with the exception of one occasion, a couple, 2-3 years ago. I'd driven through it briefly, but this is my first time properly being in Nashville because even though I'm only here for a couple of days, I actually got out a little bit yesterday and I got to walk around the city, and it is such a beautiful, clean, amazing city. Have you spent much time here?
Sort of. Yes. I wanted to spend more, and I think the times I was there, I mean, certainly went out to see live music and things like that, but I wasn't super focused on, I don't know. I feel like I could spend more concentrated time there, seeing some certain things and getting around. I mean, I've been to the Grand Ole Opry and sort of like all the main sites, but yeah, it's a really cool city, man.
Yeah, it's awesome. And I had just come from Memphis, which is another city that I had never really spent any time in before. And just, seeing and experiencing Memphis, or at least getting a taste of it, and then being able to experience Nashville. And as a musician, of course, it's one of the holy grails.
Yeah, so man. What are you doing there?
Well, actually, I didn't come here necessarily to, for the purpose of a solo trip here. I came as kind of a throughway on my way to North Carolina. I'm going to visit a friend in North Carolina, but he lives about 5 hours away from here. So it was the perfect opportunity for me to spend some time checking out the city, doing my own guided walking tour. One of the things during COVID is that, a lot of these tours are still they're coming back online, but the way I prefer to see a city, quite honestly, is doing my own kind of like walking tour. There's the options of doing the bus. I could have driven. I have my car. I could have driven around the city. I could have, taken public transportation too. And those are all fine ways of seeing a city, I think. But to really experience, to get the the ground level experience of a city, and to be able to enjoy it that way, I think is best seen on foot, if that's possible for somebody, best seen on foot.
Sure. I agree. I'm a huge fan of just walking around city. I love walking tours, first of all, because it's just, you're right. It's a great introduction. And yeah, there's something about, I don't know, you just, you slow down, right? When you're walking, you kind of take everything in more in a different way, right?
And see it from a perspective that you wouldn't obviously have seen it otherwise. I also like biking, riding my bike, and I brought my bike with me. It's on the back of my car, so so I can take that out, when the time calls for that. But yeah, those are my two favorite ways of seeing a place, on bike, on foot.
Well, you are a professional musician, so do you have any hankering to I'll use hankering because you're in Nashville, a hankering to stick around and try to get into some sessions or something?
Well, it's interesting you said that, because when I went to music school many years ago. I'm not going to date myself exactly, but I went to music school, and when we were all finishing up music school, it was like, the three directions that most people were going to go to were either Los Angeles, New York, or Nashville. I mean, those were the options. Like, you didn't really have any other options. I mean, you did, of course, but that it wasn't there was an expectation on some level, and so I did two of those three. I lived in New York City for about 10 years, nearly 10 years, and I worked there. And then I lived in Los Angeles, which I still sort of call my home base, for about 4 years. So Nashville is, I don't know if Nashville's next, but I'm really at that place in my life where I'm like, I definitely feel nomadic. Ever since COVID hit, I feel, and I am, to be quite honest, I'm very nomadic, and the type of work that I do allows me to be nomadic. So as far as joining any sessions in Nashville, I don't know. I don't really, I don't consider myself in the country music vein, so to speak, but I would, any chance, any opportunity that a musician can get to play in any of these venues, or to work with any of the amazing artists that come down here, or are from here, it's a no-brainer. You take that opportunity.
Yeah. It can't just be coincidental that, you're using Nashville as a sort of layover, it sounds like. But you could have just stayed at the Hampton Inn off the side of the highway somewhere, right? You didn't have to stop in Nashville. So maybe a little bit of a conscious or subconscious exploration of a next place for you to land, potentially.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. I was definitely taken with the city in terms of I can't say about, I haven't had too many interactions with its residents, but definitely the aesthetic of the city is one that I definitely vibe with.
Well, I should give you a little intro here. My guest today is Matt Fetbrandt, who we're talking to here. You've just heard from. He's an international piano entertainer who's performed all over the world. And one afternoon, while in a sober living house, he had an epiphany that he should travel the world for a year. Despite having only $12 in his bank account, he found a way to make it happen. And today he is kind enough to be here and to share his story and wisdom gained from that experience. So I should give you a formal, Matt, welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
Thanks, Jason. And to be able to hear those words coming from your mouth, it's interesting whenever you say "Welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend." I say it along right with you. When nice. I'm driving in the car, it's like the community that you've built here is incredible, and the connections that you fostered throughout the run of your podcast has been amazing. And like I said, when we first connected, I'm humbled and I'm grateful for that. There's this opportunity, this this kind of venue to be able to have these kinds of conversations, not just on the podcast. I'm not talking about you inspire the conversations to happen off the podcast, and to be able to realize some of those travel goals that many of us have had, ones that I know that I have had, but I didn't really realize that I had until really kind of starting to digest the information that you and your guests presented on the podcast. So I appreciate that. I really do.
Well, thank you. And you mentioned conversations off the podcast. That's how we connected. You sent me a beautiful email that really, like I said to you, these are the kind of messages that keep this thing going. I had a lot of nice things to say and shared your story. And I thought, man, we got to have Matt on to share this, because you just never know how this is going to hit other people's ears. And, people take a lot of different paths towards travel. You had your own path and your own journey towards travel. By the way, your website, mattplayspiano.com, if you want to see Matt rocking out at a piano bar, which I have a lot of questions about that, because that is such a unique job, man. But before we get into that, man, I want to hear where your musical journey started, because music's a huge part of your life. You chose it as a career path. Where did that begin for you?
I had a friend in, I guess it was third grade, third grade, who played piano, and I thought it was just, I saw him play one day and I thought it was the coolest thing. And, he was playing some classical music, also some, he was playing some ragtime, some of the Scott Joplin tunes and stuff, and at a very early age, and very talented. And I just thought it was so cool. It wasn't at that time that I started. I think it was a couple years after that I asked my parents, "Hey, can I play piano?" So I actually went to them and I said, "I would like to play piano." And they were really cool about it. But we didn't have a lot of money. I had a very kind of modest upbringing. And so we just were able to get I don't think it was a full-sized 88 key keyboard. I think it was probably like 61 keys, something like that, keyboard and on the floor. And so we placed that little Casio keyboard on the floor and started playing that way for a few years until kind of graduated up to an upright and then and so forth. But it's interesting when you were asking that question. I thought to myself, oh my gosh, the guy who inspired me first to play piano, my friend Michael, it was also the childhood friend that I went to my first national park with, and
Really?
which which of course I imagine we'll talk about later, but the
Yeah.
but the impetus to travel really kind of began with that friendship. So then, and all throughout middle school, high school, I played piano and I did other, performing arts, theater and choir and such. And I decided in high school I wanted to make it my career. I wanted to really, focus on this. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to take a lot of years of lessons. We weren't in a position where I could afford to do that. And so I kind of self-taught. And so most of my education up until college was self-taught piano. And I love listening to this day. My favorite way to learn how to play a song is by ear, and I can read music, but I don't. What's on the page to me is often quite it's quite stale, and I like to be able to improvise on that and to open the doors, so to speak, of the song. So I think that's how I eventually became a piano bar entertainer, is because it allowed me that opportunity to be able to express myself in a way that wasn't confined to what was written on the page. I was never contented to be confined to what was written on the page. So, after music college, I spent some years in New York, about 9 years in New York, and I was a music director for a dance company. I worked for an LGBT youth chorus. We did a lot of great work with promoting social justice through the arts, and and I worked for a number of other nonprofit organizations. The bulk of my work up until just a couple of years ago had been work for nonprofit organizations. I played music director for theater companies as well. So just try to keep it open in terms of how I was able to express my own musicality, whether that be through theater arts or through I also taught voice lessons and piano lessons and things like that. And so I've had a number of gigs over the years. It was only a couple of years ago that I got into piano bar entertaining.
So, I mean, at the level you're at, it seems like, was it one of those natural talent things, kind of, where, I mean, you have to learn, of course, and there's a ton involved, but was it one of those kind of right away, you just see, oh, this guy is starting to play tunes and he just got a keyboard like last week and he's already sort of figuring it out, like one of those types of situations? I'm not going to call you like a savant or anything, because
no. I was going to say it's not like a savant situation. I think what it is a little bit connecting back to what I was talking about earlier, the being able to listen to a song and try to emulate it. That's one thing, and reading the music from a page is another thing. And because I didn't have I think it was out of necessity, because I wasn't able to really have the opportunity to have piano lessons formally for many years, only for about a year and a half, 2 years max. It was out of necessity that it's just like ear to the radio, listen to what these chord changes sound like and just improvise on that. Just play around. Like I've said to students over the years, treat the piano, whatever it is, but in my case, it was piano students. So treat the piano like it's your sandbox. Treat it like it's your playground. It's a place to explore. It's a place to play. treat yourself as a kid, no matter what age you are. And so that's kind of how I explored and started to learn my own way of playing piano. And now, am I the best technician? Absolutely not. You know, there's consequences for having not studied in such a rigorous manner as a lot of people have, or you know, but then again, you know, I wasn't forced to play. And I think if I was forced to play by parents or by a teacher, I think that would taken a lot of the joy out of it. So it was out of necessity, I think, that a sense of, I need to be able to do this, but I want to do it on my terms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that I learned
we like
how
things
to,
on our terms here at this show, right?
Exactly.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a town called Hemet. It's a smaller town in Southern California. And yeah, all 18 years until I went to college in that town.
Is that a suburban town? It's like
yeah, it's, I mean,
what is it?
It's kind of like I would say a desert community, but it's got a desert climate for sure. But it's a suburb of a suburb, so to speak.
So a little more on the rural side, but still quasi suburban in a way.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it rural. I would call it suburban. It's kind of in one of those in between kind of designations. To be honest, I don't know what you would call it, but it when I was growing up there, it had a population probably of about, I don't know, 50,000, 60,000. And now it's well over 100 and 110, 20,000 for sure.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you've done so many cool things with your music, right? It's you've found ways to contribute through your music. And it sounds like you had a very rewarding career in that way, in terms of working with nonprofits and trying, I think you said, like, making a difference with your musicality in some ways. And it sounds like that's been a pretty important part of this whole journey for you. By the way, we should mention you went to the Berklee College of Music. It's not just like any music school. It is the music school to go to, I think, in the world, right? So not an easy place to get into, I would imagine.
Well, I definitely, I cherish my experiences from Berklee. I mean, it was a learning experience in a lot of ways. Even more so though than the education that, I mean, not to take anything away from the education that I received there, but I will say this: the education, the real world experience that I received right after Berklee, once I moved to New York City, that was the meat and potatoes. I mean,
that was the education.
That was the education. I mean, I stepped into my first gig, and I remember it's for a dance company, and the choreographer, the lead teaching artist, when the music director told her that I was going to be, at her site playing for a school that he had, chosen me to be there, she kind of rolled her eyes, and because I had, she had the whole audition that I had been, it was a whole nascent experience. It was very new to actually being out in the real world playing. So yes, Berklee is a great school, and I cherish my time there, and I think that they have amazing teachers. I had an amazing experience, but really what you learn there is just the very beginnings of what you need to know for having a successful career in performing.
Well, what did you learn about yourself? And I guess we could say the world in some ways, because New York City is a very special city, and there's no place like it, really. And it's such a mix of cultures. And how do you describe New York? I mean, you if you've been, you don't need to put words to it. You just know the feeling of New York City when you step out. I always remember every time I went to New York City, you step out and there's just an energy to the city, and you're in New York City. You can't really describe it any other way. You said 10 years, I think, living there. What did that experience teach you? Well,
at first, I think it was driven more by like an ego thing. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere type of thing. That was that was sort of, I mean, it was I was in my early 20s, and I was like, if if I can make it in New York City, I will. And this is not the thinking at the time, I don't think. This is all in retrospect, that this is me analyzing the situation. But if I can make it here, then I will have proved to, these people that I'm good enough.
Yeah. But I mean, isn't that like a thrill to get off
that
and say, you are actively chasing a dream and you're just like, all right, I'm here to pursue this thing. There's a rush in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're talking about the energy of New York City. I think everything that we've just talked about, both the energy of the city and also that drive to, prove oneself, that's very much alive in the DNA of New York City. That's very much alive in the performing arts, specifically of New York City, and it can any of the performing arts, and it's very competitive. And that's not to say that I didn't have, an amazing education and adventure during those 10 years there, and that I would never move back there. But you're right. It is there. The energy is both a positive and a negative thing. I think the positive is that it inspires and encourages you, and it's all around you. The level of talent, the level of performance in that city is unmatched. It really is. And you meet some of the world's brightest and most inspiring creatives. And, I'm not putting myself in that category at all, but what I am saying is that it was a privilege to be able to work alongside those people, learn from them, and also maybe at the end of the day to be in their company and to be able to make art with them was probably one of the highlights of, has been one of the highlights of my career thus far.
I'm not big into putting labels on people or the idea of putting a label on yourself, but I just think it can be limiting in a lot of ways. But some of these labels exist, like introvert and extrovert. And if you were going to choose where you land on that spectrum, where would you put yourself?
Definitely more towards introvert. Social situations. I think that's actually one of the reasons why I chose the performing arts, was because it was an avenue, it was a channel for me to be able to express myself in a way that I didn't feel self-conscious, and when I step on stage to this day, I do have a little sense of that, but for the most part, it's a place where I can express myself, and I can allow myself to just like let the walls, let the walls fall down and let down my guard. And especially now as a piano bar entertainer, it's just, it's such a wild ride during some of these performances that we, and we're in it together. And that's the biggest part, is that I think as somebody who is more introverted, somebody who finds it challenging to, strike up conversations with a person out of the blue, or to have, really kind of intimate conversations off of the bat. It's really difficult to do that. And so the intimacy, I think, that I have found in this kind of mutual performance, because I don't know how many of the listeners have been to a piano bar or whatnot, and I know, everybody has their own experience. Then there's all kinds to dueling and whatnot, but there is, at the end of the day, at least the way I see it and the way that I like to structure my shows, is a sense of community. And that community is singing together, performing together. It's kind of what I've done throughout my career in terms of, I was mentioning the nonprofits that I worked for earlier, playing piano and music directing for. The community aspect of bonding through music, through song, is very real. And I mean, there have been scientific studies done on this about how it is the act of singing together, the act of playing together, is one that is it changes the structure of your brain, and it allows for, at the end of the day, just very plainly, it allows for you to be able to see and be seen by other people in a way that, if you are like me, a more introverted person, it comes as a huge relief and a release at the same time.
I think that's so fascinating, because yeah, on the one hand, the introverted nature probably gives you the space and the time to sort of concentrate on your craft, right? You don't mind kind of working in that way in solitude and that sort of thing. But, I think about an introvert's like worst nightmare. Again, this is just my assumption, would be, getting on stage in front of people and performing and having interaction at a very high level, right? Now, I find it really fascinating that for you, that is the welcome part, right? Or the release or the place that you can, I've tried to open mic like 2 times and it was a total disaster because I don't have the chops, first of all. And secondly, there's just something, I don't get that feeling of getting up in front of people and as it's, oh, okay, this is where I can put the walls down and be myself. It's the opposite for me. I'm just like, oh my God, look at all these people here. They're looking, this is weird. I think that's so interesting that you get that feeling walking on stage, where you can express yourself in a different way. And that's a huge, being a piano entertainer. If you're listening, if you've never been to a piano bar, you have to go, because it is an experience. And like you said, it's very communal, very community oriented, but man, you still have to be a presence there. You have to rally the troops. You have to kind of, you create the energy. It's all you.
Yeah. Well, in a sense, it has a lot to do with the entertainer. They create the vibe how about this? They set the framework for the vibe. It's really and of course, encouraging others to join in on the songs. That's a big part of the job, to have the interactive quality of the musical experience, because a lot of people come to piano bars, or it doesn't even have to be a piano bar. It could be like a karaoke or whatever get together, and that kind of self-consciousness does creep in, because I think one of the reasons it does, and the only reason I'm saying this is because it's been told to me through several of my students throughout the years, is that somebody, and this is the thing, somebody told you, when not you Jason, but the general you, somebody told you when you were young that you weren't good enough, that you should keep your mouth shut, that you can't sing. It's really unfortunate, because the messages, I think, that we gain when we were kids, those really stick with us. And it's very hard to undo. It's very hard to kind of peel back the layers of the onion on that one. And so my job, when somebody comes in and I can tell that they want to sing a song, I could tell that they, and they're like, well, maybe I should do this. Or they whispered in my ear, I want to do this, but I don't know. I don't think I'm good enough. I get that at piano bar, at the piano bars that I've played at. I've gotten so many folks who have come up to me who have been like, can I sing a song? But I don't know if I'm good enough to do it. And I said, well, why don't we sing it together? Why don't, that's a way in. Why don't we sing it together? You don't even have to, like, I give them the mic. I'm like, you don't even have to hold the mic up to your mouth. Like, just hold it away if that makes you feel more comfortable. Like, let's start to just really have this experience together and show each other that, hey, it's not about you hitting every note perfectly on pitch, in tune, with vibrato, if it's if that's the style of music. It's not about all of those specificities where you have to feel like you have to be perfect. And that's been my thing over the year, is like, this is advice to myself too, because that's something that has held me back, and something that has really kind of I think informed my artistry in a negative way, which is that I have felt over the years that everything had to be perfect, everything, and if it wasn't, I wasn't going to be able to allow myself to share it with the world. And so, just, to sum that all up, I think that having that experience, if you are one of those people who have been, who are introverted, who are thinking to themselves, maybe I'm not good enough to do this, do it with somebody else. have that experience, bring a friend. If not, sing with the piano bar entertainer, sing with a friend. And it doesn't have to be just at a piano bar, but have the experience with somebody else, because doing it alone is often very, very scary and kind of sometimes reinforces that negative self-talk. So yeah, it's all about that community experience, I think.
I love that. Yeah, so much power in community. And what you were describing, I was thinking about the introvert extrovert thing and everything we've been talking about. And music was sort of functioning as that common bridge, right? It's like, hey, like you said, you might not be the person that feels super comfortable going up to somebody and just striking up a conversation on the street, but when you have music as a sort of a bridge to kind of build those conversations, then it's kind of like it's a much easier way through. And I think in some regards, travel can be that for some people, right? I mean, that's where I really encourage people to solo travel at some point, even if they don't feel comfortable, because you can learn to use travel as that bridge to create those connections. For some people it might be travel or music or different things in different situations, but it's nice to find that sort of common ground and work there. You can build some deep connections quickly. You know how it is, you got on the road with somebody. I mean, you can build a connection pretty fast, because you're kind of going through this experience together, this shared experience. And that's essentially what you're creating, a shared experience like over one night when you do a piano bar gig, which is fascinating. The music lifestyle isn't necessarily the healthiest lifestyle, depending on how you're doing it. Often can be a lot of late nights and things like that. I'm not sure when it started for you, but you mentioned in the email kind of having this epiphany when you were in the sober living house. And I'm just wondering, the drugs and the addiction and that sort of thing, I mean, when did that become, in hindsight, of course, I mean, all of these things start in different ways, but I'm just curious for you, what that part of your journey has been, because this really leads into the travel aspect, right? But, I think we should get a little bit of background on what this part of your life has been before we get into how you then made the transition to travel.
Right. Yeah. So, as you mentioned, it doesn't all happen at once. It kind of like it takes years, I think, to kind of build and grow, and in a way that is in a way that you don't see. Sometimes you don't even see it coming. And in my case, I fell into deep addiction when I was living in New York. Probably, I would say, about 4 or 5 years living into New York. So this was, maybe around 2012, 2013. And it got pretty serious. I remember one time, I'm not going to get into the very, very specifics, but, to kind of like lay out how it felt in maybe a single image, is I got off the subway one day and I was just staring at that hole in the ground and just waiting for the next subway to come. And as I see the next subway train car coming, I was like, what would it be like? What would it be like if I just jumped in front of it? And that was clearly a low point. And it wasn't long after that where, a series of other things happened, and I made the decision. I said, I have to get some help for this, and I can't keep living this way. It was affecting all aspects of my life. My career, my family interactions, my sense of purpose, everything, my sense of self-worth. I decided to go to rehab, and so I did that, and that helped in a sense. It kind of introduced me to the world of recovery, and the many I would say the benefits of living a life in recovery, living a sober life. And for me, I knew, in my heart of hearts, that was something that I needed. It was not, I didn't think, and to this day, I don't think that I'm able to continue to, just use drugs and alcohol occasionally here and there. It just doesn't really work. And I know, that's maybe not the case for everybody, but in my situation, that's kind of how where I landed. It wasn't that rehab experience wasn't my first, or sorry, wasn't my last one. I did go to another one years later. One of the reasons that brought me out to Los Angeles, and it was at that point where I really started to commit myself to learning and working, a program of recovery, and to really understanding, to bring this back to community. I think that's kind of like the theme that's going here, is that it was a community that of recovering individuals that really have helped me over the years. It's having that community, the recovery, whatever program that somebody chooses to do, whatever way they decide to work their recovery. That's one thing, but the thing that I have found most beneficial, is having a community, having a support network. And so that led to me, living in sober living houses for, off and on for a couple of years in Los Angeles, which brings me to, when I decided to start traveling when I was managing a sober living house in Los Angeles.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about that. What is a sober living house? Is it a rehab facility? Is it something in between? Educate me.
Yeah.
Here.
So they often referred to as halfway houses. I think that's kind of like for me, it seems like an antiquated term, but it's not. It's only antiquated in the sense that, there's a stigma around that term, but it's in the sense that it's halfway between an inpatient program where everything is monitored, your cell phones are taken away, your day is structured, like an inpatient rehab program like that, in between that and full quote unquote freedom living. So like being able to make your own choices, going wherever you want to go, having your own apartment, that type of thing, like the quote unquote normal lifestyle. So it's halfway between that. So in other words, I like to use the term sober living home or sober living house. It's just my preference. And so the structure of those, that kind of varies widely too, but often the basic, the foundations of it are that they're built around, of course, like I said before, they're built around a community. And it can be, there could be men and women, and people who identify, as not either man or woman, but it could be broken up in terms of those labels, depending on the specific sober living home. So there could be an all men sober living home, men helping men, through their sobriety. But generally, everybody's living together. You often have times where there's shared meals, shared, eating experiences to be able to talk about the day, that type of thing. Chores are assigned and everybody has to do their chores. Usually, a lot of times, sober living house, you don't have your own space. You have to live, you're assigned a room and a bed, and you have to live in that room with somebody else. Sometimes, in my opinion, if you get lucky, you get to have your own room. And so there's a little bit of respite from the constant, like I said before, I'm a little more of an introvert, so I like my alone time. But yeah, that's generally the structure of them. And the stay, the length of time that one would stay at one, depends. Sometimes when I was managing a house in Los Angeles, we would have people stay anywhere from a day or two, and then they decided it wasn't for them, to years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing all that. And I think, the moment you shared on the subway there or next to the subway was, it's about as vulnerable as you can get. So thank you. I think that, paints the picture kind of where things were for you. And I want to dive into this moment because when you wrote me the email, if you don't mind, I'm just going to read a little snippet of this email. You said, one afternoon in July 2019, while living in a sober living house in Los Angeles and working on my recovery, I looked down at my desk and was staring at 2 paychecks from a gig I had recently played. It was one of those rare moments in life where a calling came to me in just an instant. I said to myself, I'm going to start saving to travel the world for a year. I had just $12 in my bank account, and up until that point in my life, due to my addiction issues as well as my injudicious spending habits. I had never been able to save more than a couple $100 at any one time. Cut to 7 months later, March of 2020, I had reached my goal of saving $20,000 to travel the world. Holy crap, man. Well, I mean, that's huge. Congratulations, first of all. And we're going to talk about what you did with your trip and traveling around to the national parks, traveling 16,000 miles through 34 states and some of this other stuff. But man, we got to start with unpacking some of this above, because, a huge part of travel, of course, there's the intention, the commitment. I mean, it sounds like within that moment, you almost had those things immediately, right? This intention, like real true commitment to this idea of travel. But then there's like sort of the logistical aspects, a huge part of which is saving money. So, how did you go from living your entire life, from not being able to save hardly anything, to being able to save $20,000? Like, how did you change your mindset, your habits, anything that we can pick out here?
Yeah, I'm shaking my head because, when I hear it read back to me, it's even more, confounding. Yes. So we talked about like these kind of like white light experiences, and they're not as traumatic, I think, as they sound necessarily. They can be, but in my case, it wasn't like a, boom. I felt like I was hit with something, but it was just a realization. It was like, okay, I want to do this. And now the reasons behind all that, I think it came from a place of feeling, and this is all, of course, in retrospect, kind of like analyzing it, but I think it came from a place of really knowing how vulnerable I was and how I could have easily, within any of my runs, I could have died. And I've had friends who have died, and it's been it's a painful situation. In any case, when you have somebody close to you who dies, but when you're in a community of people where that's constantly happening, it's a reminder. I think it's a reminder that that's the present moment, and living and really kind of just being open to experiences in life. Life is about experiences for me, and sharing those experiences. And so I wanted to, I think what that was a realization, a profound realization, in a moment that it was like, this is something that I've wanted to do since I was really young. And I've been very fortunate, blessed, lucky, whatever word you want to use, to be here still. And so why not take that opportunity and devote my time and energy to being able to make that happen. And of course, it didn't just happen like that. I had a lot of luck along the way, and great fortune and support, this show being one of them, this podcast being one of them, where I learned a lot and how to do specific things like save. And I had never, like I said, I had literally had $12 in my bank account, and I'd never been able to save more than $100 at a time throughout my entire life. That day I opened up, I think it was Google Sheets. I love Excel spreadsheets. So, and they've been extremely helpful in this process. I had never had set a budget before, but what I did was I created an Excel spreadsheet and started tracking every penny that came in and every penny that went out every single day. And while that might be have gone overboard, I think in some people's assessments, but I think that it really helped me see where the money was, where it was coming in, where it was going. And it wasn't something that was automated. There's a lot of programs, apps that will automate it, but I decided I want to see manually. I want to see where the money's coming in, where it's going. And every time that I had some extra cash, for through playing a gig or whatever, I set it aside into my bank account. And I know that doesn't really answer the question all that great, because I don't know that to this day, and I've been thinking about it, why I was able to do that in kind of like this, like in an instant, just kind of changed my mindset for a lifetime of habits that had gone against all of that. But I think it does come from that place of a realization of wanting to be able to experience life, and knowing that I had been so close to death at so many points of my life. And it's just it was a gift, really. It was a gift to me to be able to realize that.
Incredible. Congratulations on just the turnaround so quickly too, in terms of the setting the intention to travel and then just getting right into it. I mean, I think the key there, if I could pull anything out, is just, having that real intention and commitment to a trip or to a lifestyle or travel, whatever that means to you, right? In your case, it was, sounds like you were just going to save a bunch of money and take off and do something and have these experiences. And that was going to be enough. And that gave you something to shoot for, right? And then what you did essentially by creating the spreadsheet, sounds to me, is you just created a hyper awareness around something that you'd struggle with. Like you said, that was smart. Instead of automating it, you were just tracking it manually. And that really allowed you to see what was happening on a day-to-day level. Because a lot of these things, like saving money, I mean, it's happening in sort of these micro amounts, right? So it's easy to kind of lose track of things in a day-to-day world that we live in. But when you're tracking it all, it's just going to force you to kind of take a look at where you can make improvements. And I think there's some saying there. It's like, track what you want to grow or something like that. I think it's a good general rule, because otherwise you don't know if it's growing or declining. But I mean, the driver for you was this motivation to travel. And you said also in the email, I believe that the primary catalyst of my resolve to travel came from a deep place of wanting to grow. There are a lot of different ways one can grow as a person. So why did you think travel was that for you?
I think that by traveling is one of the best ways to be able to understand, period. So now you could take that in a few ways: understand other cultures, understand other people, understand your relationship to nature, which has been a big part of this past year, which I didn't think it would be due to the change in plans of my travel plans. But I thought mine was going to be more of a cultural experience in terms of, going to different countries and meeting. And I have done some of that, but largely it has been nature based over the past year. But growth in terms of understanding my relationship to these other things, to things outside of myself, so to speak. Like I've spent so much time over the past few years, quote unquote, doing work on myself. That's air quotes right there. Doing work on myself. And at a certain point, of course, that work is necessary. I think it's necessary to grow. The work is important, but also it's very important to be able to understand each other. And as somebody comes from, a marginalized community, I think a couple of marginalized communities, I feel like there's room for me to be able to be an advocate, not only for myself, but for the importance of connection. It's the only way that we are going to have some peace with each other. If we're, and I don't want to get too woo woo about this, but
get woo woo by all means. Get woo woo.
well, it's just my observations, and take these for what they are. But my observations are those who a lot of times I've had friends who have made the choice or because of a certain circumstance have never really ventured outside of their hometown, or gone to a place that was, or seen people, interacted with people who may be a little bit different looking, acting than themselves, etc. And so I think I was very fortunate in that, when I moved to New York, coming from a town that was really small, to be able to have exposure at a minimum, just to have exposure to different ways of living, to different lifestyles. And so I think what travel can do is really broaden those perspectives that, and to this day, it's happening for me. I find myself, making a judgment on somebody, or, having a preconceived notion. It happens every day, all the time. But at least now I'm able to start to realize that that's happening. And I think travel can do that, has done that to a large extent, just being able to interact with something that is different than your own experience that has been so tightly held since the time that you were young. This is important.
Yeah, so well said. It's in many ways, I think it's all right. Hey, let's go out and learn about the world, and we take so much in. But a huge part of travel is also letting go of a lot of things, like preconceived notions or judgments or things like that.
And those are the important things. I was thinking the things that you mentioned just now are the important things, but the things that are less important, but to a certain degree still important, are things, material things, which was part of my story too, in that when I moved into the sober living, there's no room to bring to bring all the furniture that you had. There's no room.
That's what
to
we
bring
call
all that
forced minimalism.
Yeah.
Right.
and it was great. Oh my gosh, Jason, it was great because it's such a freeing experience. And I think I heard on your show, one of your guests, I don't know what year it was from, but one of your guests a while back said every time that they bought something new, they resolved to get rid of something or to donate something. I've tried to hold on to that philosophy, and living out of necessity, living the sober living was grads for me to be able to live that kind of minimal lifestyle, forced minimalist lifestyle. But then it just became, after that, it became something to value, really to value, because with the fewer material possessions I have, the happier I am. And I really see it every time I buy something. I'm like, I have that initial rush, and then I'm like, okay, how long am I going to use this for? And that story, that whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's great. It's life-changing. Forced minimalism is not a bad thing.
No.
That's one of the things that backpacking and taking off to see the world is. It's a part of it, right? You can't just sort of discount it as, it's a part of the experience. Yeah, I think when you change your relationship to material things, that tends to stay with you, right? Like it's a total reversal if you grew up, kind of valuing the collection of stuff, and then all of a sudden you start to see the value in having less stuff. It just flips everything. And then you do become more discerning with what you bring into your life and things like that. And I think it's a good thing for, personally for individuals and for the planet, really, as consumers. I'm looking around at toys and all this stuff here. I mean, more stuff than I've ever had in my life in this house, but still with my own stuff every day. I'm like, well, okay, what can I get rid of next? How can I, pare this down? I can't really control some of the things going on in this house right now, but I'm trying, man. But it's another part of the travel experience that you carry with you, I think, and a powerful one. I want to talk about the trip. I mean, obviously COVID changed your plans, but you saved $20,000 and then you ended up going to staying in the US, and sounds like you did it, very safely, under, respectfully and all that. But you said you went to 16,000 miles, 34 states, 18 national parks. First of all, what was the trip like? What was it like pulling out that first day, like meeting your goal, saving all that money, getting in the car? It must have been a magic. Maybe it's like I'm doing the Hollywood thing where it's just, the top's down and the wind's blowing in your hair. And,
well, it was torrential rain, rain. So,
yeah.
So, it was in some respects, it was sort of like, cinematic, but in others, it was very scary because I had this would have been March of 2020, and
okay, that's just when things were really ramping up,
right? Right around the time that in the United States the pandemic was declared as a pandemic, and I had been playing a gig at that. I was supposed to play a gig for the entire month of March in Santa Barbara, California. And I had played half of that gig. So around the 15th, 16th of the month, they were like, governor's orders, we have to shut down. And so my original flight date was supposed to be Earth Day, April of 2020. So I had just given up my spot at the sober living house, so I had nowhere to live. I had just lost my job, and COVID was breaking out, and we didn't know how long or what was going to go. So I said to myself, I was sitting in my car downtown Santa Barbara, and I was saying to myself, what am I going to do? So I opened up my phone and I opened up Google Maps, and I looked up the United States, and I just started kind of like moving my finger around and stuff like that.
Wow.
and I went down to Texas and like kind of like pinched and pulled and looked. Oh, hey, look here in Texas. There's a national park. It's called Big Bend, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna go. But in my case, it was like I'm.
But you had a lot of additional stresses because like all the things you just mentioned are unusual. Like you gave up your spot, COVID, a pandemic. That's a lot of extra stress for
and maybe it sparked me in a negative way to make an impulsive decision. But at the same time, in retrospect, I don't regret a moment of it, not a second of it, because I knew that I wanted to incorporate travel somehow. I knew I had to do it in a safe way, and I said to myself before I even started, I was like, okay, I'm going to get tested regularly, and if I ever do come back positive for COVID, that's the end of the trip. I'll get an Airbnb somewhere and hunker down or whatever. So yeah, it was just a matter of, as a lot of these decisions have kind of, as far as travel has gone, decisions that I've made to go to Guatemala or to Mexico, which also happened within this last year and a half, I should say, have happened in a very short amount of time, because I find the more that I'm very analytical, and the more that I think about something, I can talk myself out of. There's great reasons why I shouldn't do this. There's always quote unquote great reasons, and sometimes there are legitimate reasons, but but I think we have a tendency, or at least I have a tendency, to find and cherry pick the reasons why it's like it's best to do this tomorrow or later. I don't want to be, one of the big things was, I don't want to be 70 years old and, or 65 years old and maybe not being in a physical shape to do this anymore, and I realize that there are a lot of 65, 70-year-olds who are able to, who are mobile and everything. But at the same time, I was like, I want to have some energy, and I want to be able to do this. So I'm going to do it now. And so that kind of off the cuff, like spur of the moment decision to just get in the car and to drive toward Big Bend was, it was one out of necessity. Number one, because I was living in my car. I guess that's how you would describe it. And two, I wanted to travel, and the national parks were a place that I thought to myself, if I'm going to be anywhere that's outdoors, like, why not choose a place that has that has so much outdoor space that I can safely distance myself to the point where I feel comfortable doing that. And I think the national parks, there was a calling, and there was actually I don't know if it was the director of the national parks or Department of the Interior that issued a statement saying that they were encouraging people to get out and to explore the parks during this time. It's so important for, I think it was important for my mental health to be able to have some outdoor experiences and to not feel like I was inside all the time. Because I could have, honestly, I could have got an Airbnb or tried to rent an apartment or something, and then hunker down. But that just wasn't what was calling to me.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, in the eternal battle of the practical mind, the reasons you should or should not do something, you're just choosing to lock onto the thoughts that like argue for the, hey, let's just do this, which
which can be reckless. Which can be reckless. Like, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, there's a balance to all of this, right? At the end of the day, there is a balance, and there's I was taught a long time ago, make out a list, like write it down, a pros and cons list. What are the pros? And of course, there's a bias. There's going to be a bias, and then we have the confirmation bias of like, okay, well, all these things are happening, so it must mean that so the thing that I was looking for is definitely the thing that I should pursue. So I can't say. And when I left Santa Barbara, I was driving toward from California towards Arizona, and at the moment that this was the cinematic part, the moment that I crossed over the border, I got a text message from a friend that said, Governor Newsom, who's the governor of California, Governor Newsom just shut down the state and issued a stay-in-place order. The moment that I and at the same time I said it was raining, it was torrential downpour all the way into Arizona. But when I got into Arizona, there was a double rainbow right there at the same time. So I thought to myself, hey, it's a sign. I'm just gonna
double rainbow. Oh my gosh. And escape from LA, all in one moment. That's very cool, man. That is, well, I mean, yeah, you call it a sign from the universe or whatever you want, but that's pretty powerful. Now you're nomadic, I guess. Is that what's happening here? Are you living off of the money you saved? What are you doing? And how, I mean, yeah, well, I have a couple more questions around that, but
I guess I would consider myself nomadic now because I didn't get an apartment, and I've been staying everywhere from Airbnbs to hotels to camping. I spent a number of months with my folks, which was great to reconnect with them, because if I can use this term silver lining as it relates to the pandemic, I even hesitate to use that. But if there is a silver lining, then there was being able to reconnect with my folks.
I think we have to find our own silver linings in these situations. Yeah. Just have to. That's not a vote for having a pandemic. I don't think anybody's taking it that way. So. And so yeah, I just it's been split up in a number of ways, accommodations, and part of it has been living off my savings. Part of it is pandemic unemployment assistance. Part of it is, I haven't been able to work for a year. The gigs are just starting to come back, and entertainment, live entertainment, it's like that was going to be the last one to come back, because especially at bars, because that nobody, that's not considered an quote unquote essential. But I do think that now that the gigs are going to start to come back, that I will continue to live this kind of lifestyle. It's one that I really gravitated towards. And when Nomadland came out, I really connected with that. I haven't been on the road as long as many of those folks have been, but there is a sense of freedom in being able to choose where, and to explore different destinations when you want to. And obviously, now that more people are going to be location independent as a result of the pandemic, and jobs and companies offering that type of employment structure, I think people are going to be able to find that they too are going to find some joy in being able to explore different places that that they may have never had the opportunity to go to before, at least didn't think that they had the opportunity to go to before, which was the situation I had. I thought I had to live in Los Angeles or New York City and be a musician in those cities. But often the things that we think of is not the way things turn out. So I'm just grateful to be able to live this lifestyle. And who knows, maybe in 2-5 years, I won't like it anymore. But in the moment now is what I'm focusing on. And I'm enjoying it. Well, hey, anybody listening, if you're looking for an awesome piano man, MattPlaysPiano.com. You could bring him to your city. He's traveling. He's on the road. He's ready to go. That's awesome. Give us your top 3 piano tunes right now.
Piano tunes. Top 3 as in top 3 that I like to play, or top 3 that are requested?
However you want to interpret it. Maybe that you like to play would be good.
Oh man.
Or you like to listen to. It might not.
I like playing Freebird. Because I interpret the guitar solo in my own way on the on the piano.
I'd love to hear that. That sounds epic.
Yeah, I like let's see, Hotel California is always fun to play, even though it's requested quite a bit. Again, because I like doing the guitar solos on the piano, and oh gosh, a lot of these songs. I've played and sung so many times, and I don't know. The third one would be so my background is a lot in musical theater. So I like playing definitely, and at a couple of the piano bars I played at, they've been more show tune based piano bars. So it would probably be something Broadway, something like, I don't know, jazz, maybe like in the Candor and Ebb type of thing, like something that just gets us smiling and going like that. So yeah, I don't know how we got from Freebird to show tunes, but that's what happens in the what happens in the piano bar scene.
That's right. I love it. That pretty much says it all, right? I mean, if I were there right now, I'd be requesting Daniel. That I just love Daniel.
Beautiful song.
So, well, man, I want to respect your time. I feel like we have a lot more to talk about. We have to do a part 2 at some point. Maybe talk a little bit more about music and some specific national parks and things like that. It'd be nice. Man, I'd love to do it in person. We got to get you a gig out here in Norway, I guess.
My agent actually was set up a gig for me in Norway, and it fell through. Well, this was pre-COVID, and then it fell through as a result. So, but I was that was when I was first gonna message you and say like, hey,
tell him to set it up again. Come on.
So yeah, I would love to connect in person, and I just appreciate everything you do, Jason. It just it really has inspired me, and for anybody who's listening, that saving up that $20,000 was in no small part to the advice and the help that I've gotten from you and from your guests. So really appreciate it, Jason.
Well, no, thank you. I mean, you did the hard work, and going back to kind of put a bow on this, I'd say that's the power of community, right? I mean, that's what we're trying to foster here, and just getting to share these stories. And I'm so glad that the podcast has been helpful in that way to you. And now you've come on to pay it forward to share your story and, to help others in that way. So thank you so much for taking the time. Again, check out mattplayspiano.com if you want to catch up with Matt, send him a message, or just watch him perform in one of the piano bars. Check out what he does. Very cool stuff. And you're an awesome guy. I hope we can keep in touch, Matt. And thanks so much for your time today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jason.
All right. Take care. There you go. Thank you to Matt for taking the time to not just be on the show, but to write that initial email, to get in touch and to share his story, being so vulnerable and just laying it all out there. He wasn't asking to be on the show or anything. And I just thought, man, we have to share this with the community. And I just love when you all get in touch and I get to learn a little bit more about you. So please never hesitate to reach out. Jason@zerototravel.com is my email. You can also leave me in voicemail. In fact, I got one just the other day. Have a quick listen.
So I'm outside listening to your podcast. I'm so sorry to hear you're sick. I'm glad you had a good time in London. I hope you feel better soon. Sending you lots of love and healing from Northern California. And this is Mariah. Thank you for your show.
Now, how sweet is that? Thank you, Mariah. Yes, if you've listened to the last couple shows, I did come down with something nasty, and I feel a lot better now. The rest of my family's sick, but I'm feeling pretty good, and I appreciate you checking in. That was so sweet. So anyway, thanks for the voicemail, and it's just always a pleasure to open up the voicemail box and to get these. It doesn't take more than 90 seconds. You don't have to put an email in or anything. It's free. You just go and you leave a message and get in touch, and I'll send you a message back. So thanks again for checking in, and I was getting those Northern California vibes. I can feel that ocean air. Love it. Okay, couple things on this interview. First of all, this advice to me was a bit counterintuitive because when I tell people to save money for travel, one of the first things I say is to automate your savings, to set up an automated way in which your money can be deposited from whatever collective bank account it's in to a separate account or somewhere else. So you just don't even see it go. It just goes and it gets put into a travel fund and you don't even pay attention to it. You're not allowed to touch it. And then when Matt said he was tracking everything manually and not automating things intentionally, I thought it was a wonderful exercise if you are somebody who's having trouble saving. And as Matt mentioned, it's tough to be that meticulous. Not everybody might track every single little thing. But if you're having a hard time, that might be the way to go, even if you only do that for a week or two, just to get your head around everything that's going on. You know, saving money for, we could do a whole podcast on personal finance, but saving money for travel, you got to have the money to travel, right? You don't have to have as much as you think, as you probably have learned either through your own experience or listening to this show, but you do need some, right? And that was a nice piece of advice that I just wanted to kind of share and pull out of the show as a reminder. This is going to tie in with this pretty incredible quote I found that I'm going to leave you with in a few moments, all about the habit of saving money, what it can do for you. And I was just searching for a quote on saving money, and this one popped up, and I'm like, this is perfect. So I'm going to leave you with that before I let you go. First, I do want to talk about this idea of planning a trip spontaneously. I shouldn't say planning, going on a trip spontaneously versus being more analytical about it. Something else Matt and I talked about. And that idea of a spur of the moment kind of decision, as Matt seemed to embrace as part of the first leg of his journey. This is always tough. And one thing this reminded me of as I was reflecting on this was a book I read recently called The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. And the whole book, it's essentially his autobiography. He's the guy that wrote The Untethered Soul also, which that book is one of my favorite of all time. So Surrender Experiment is interesting in the sense that it's an autobiography. So you get to hear his story and how he used surrender as a mindset to just basically throw himself into life, and how it led to so many great things for him, and how he used it in some of the toughest parts of his life as well. Truly surrendered, which is not an easy thing to do. And that's one thing that popped up in my head when we mentioned the spur of the moment trip. Should you kind of take a trip spur of the moment? Should you be more analytical about it? I think both of those avenues, or that if that's a spectrum, there's sort of that's on either end and you have everything in between, right? I think all of those points on the spectrum can serve you in different ways throughout your life. Maybe sometimes if you're hemming and hawing too much and you find that you've been putting travel off for a long time, going with the attitude of just surrender and being more spontaneous, spur of the moment about it, and just being like, okay, you know what? Yeah, okay, this place, yeah. I don't know much about it, or I don't know, I just need to get this trip going. I just need to get my life on the road going, whatever the case is. So let's just freaking do it. Sometimes I think that's necessary. I think planning ahead is necessary too at times. Again, both of these modes can serve you as a traveler, making the spur of the moment spontaneous decision to travel and the more analytical long-term planning. The question is, which of those is going to serve you best next? And that's a question for you to answer for yourself. And only you, of course, can know that answer. But sometimes it's good to kind of point these things out and just think about them. And, have I been too analytical, or have I been too spontaneous recently? And has that led to bad things, or quote unquote bad things? Maybe I should switch things up the next time. Just some food for thought. Just, again, like I said in the beginning, just some commentary to throw out and share with you, something to think about, something to chew on. Okay. I'm going to leave you with this quote. Again, I thought this was wonderful when I Googled it up because it really ties in with what we were talking about around saving. And this is from T.T. Munger. He said, The habit of saving is itself an education. It fosters every virtue, teaches self-denial, cultivates the sense of order, trains to forethought, and so broadens the mind. There you have it. You might have thought you were just saving money, but you were doing all those other things at the same time. All right, I'll let you get out of here. Have a wonderful day. Smile, take a chance today, book a trip if you'd like. Maybe a spur-of-the-moment trip, who knows? Maybe be a little analytical, plan one out. And enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by ZeroToTravel.com. Ideas and advice to make your travel dreams a reality.